name's Kevin, and I'm going to read you all a story. So sit back and be comfortable. I would show the pictures to you, but yeah, they're kind of hard to see. So I shall just read, and hopefully you will enjoy. But here we go. Now this is all about Munro, who was 4. There was nothing unusual about Munro. He wouldn't eat.
No!
He wouldn't sleep.
No!
He hated little girls. His was a stable, well-rounded, fully integrated life. Then one day he received a letter. He had one of his big friends read it to him.
It's from the local draft board 92. It says your friends and neighbors send you greetings.
So while other children jumped rope and hula hooped and chased each other around the block and did exactly what was normal for them to do, Munro came to the shocking realization that at the age of 4, he had been drafted. The next morning, without telling his mother, she always took on so, Munro went for his physical.
Unbutton me, mister?
He took a whole series of tests. He took an intelligence test. He took a height test. Height 6'2". All along, Munro tried to explain that he was just a little boy, but the doctors were too busy drafting some famous singer to even notice him. So Munro was classified 1A.
Button me, mister?
Go home and settle all your business affairs. You'll hear from us in 21 days. Of course, Munro didn't say anything, for fear someone might call him unpatriotic. So he went home and didn't tell a soul. His mother always took on so. In 21 days, a second letter came. This one was from the president himself, which made Munro feel better about the whole thing. So with a bar of soap, some chocolate cigarettes, and a toothbrush, Munro went to war. T-ha! The sergeant couldn't speak English very well. For huh? He spoke in code. Hup, hoop, hip, haw, hup, hoop, hip, haw. Munro thought he was crazy. First thing, Munro and all the others were marched off to a big hall to hear an important-looking man talk. The man explained that they were all there because of a world struggle. It seemed that one side was in favor of God and the other was not. The man used very simple words. Even Munro could understand. When the man was finished, everyone was marched off again. Now Munro was a full-fledged soldier. He learned to play all the games that soldiers played, like face, right face, left face, up face, down face, in face, out face, face. Or another game called Take This Man's Name, where everyone must sweep and clean and make the barracks as shiny as they could ever be, and then a man who was it would walk past each bunk with a cranky look on his face and say, take this man's name, take this man's name, take this man's name. Or another game called Bend Over, where you are it, where if you're it, you had to go into the kitchen and bend over while you mopped floors, cleaned stoves, and washed out garbage cans. Oh, there were so many games to play. And just when Munro would think that they were all out, along came a new one. After a while, he grew tired of playing. He lost all his zest for mud, guns, and food. But the sergeants and the captains and the colonels and the generals always loved to play. They never seemed to get tired. But poor Munro was very tired. So he went to the sergeant and said,
I'm only 4.
The sergeant didn't look up. Sergeants are very busy people.
Hey, I'm only 4.
The sergeant still didn't look up. The way to always tell it's a sergeant is if he doesn't look up. Finally he said, "It is the official policy of the army not to draft men of 4. Ergo, you cannot be 4. Ergo, you only think you are 4. Go on sick call." So the next morning, Munro went on sick call. Sick call was held in a big, crowded room. Sometimes it was drafty, sometimes it was overheated. Keeps them on their toes, reasoned the policymakers. Every once in a while, a doctor would walk through the room, muttering in a low voice, everybody's faking, everybody's faking. Finally, it was Munro's turn. What's wrong? A man asked.
I'm only 4,
said Munro. How long have you been feeling this way? The man asked.
I'm only 4,
said Munro. Open your mouth, we'll soon fix this, the man said.
I'm only 7,
said Munro. Munro was sent on his way with a box of white pills and a warning to stop faking. Sick call was over. But try as he might, Munro could not get over the idea that he was 4. He went to the psychiatrist. A malingerer, huh? Bucking for a psycho discharge, eh? I've handled your type before, analyzed the psychiatrist. He went to the chaplain. My son, you'll find life here in the army so much more rewarding if you just try to make the best of it and decide to face reality. Let's have another chat real soon, okay? Quoth the chaplain. He went to the colonel. Get out of here, you little goofball, or I'll shove you in the stockades for a month, opined the colonel. He went before a whole board of captains and majors and colonels who had all once been social workers on the Lower East Side, so that they understood about people. They stared at Munro a long time, then they said, Go back and try! Munro promised he would try. Really try this time. For if so many wise men claimed it was impossible for him to be 4, how indeed could he be? So Munro returned to the barracks, his little back aching, his little legs weary. This was to be his life from now on. He would march with the best of them. He would shoot with the best of them. And if need be, he would go to war with the best of them. And as he walked, he saw a new bunch of men, all marching along out of step, all looking very unhappy. Munro just stood there and watched. See that man? Said the sergeant, suddenly pointing at Munro. All the new men looked. That's a soldier, said the sergeant proudly. That's what we're going to train you to be. All the men looked. We're going to separate the men from the boys, said the sergeant. And Munro began to cry. Right there in the middle of the field, he cried and cried. Stop that crying, soldier, said the sergeant, and he looked embarrassed. Munro cried louder. Stop that crying, soldier, said the colonel, and he came running out of his office looking very upset. Munro only cried louder. Outran the doctor, outran the psychiatrist, outran the chaplain. No one had heard such a sound in the middle of an army camp before. Stop! You must stop that crying, soldier! They all said, but Munro wouldn't. Then out came the general. Everyone stepped back. Everyone saluted, except Munro, who cried. Soldiers don't cry, said the general. Everyone nodded. Munro cried. Only little boys cry, said the general. Everyone nodded. Munro cried. Are you a soldier or a little teensy-weensy, helpless crying baby boy? Demanded the general. Yeah, said everybody. Munro just cried. The general stared at him scornfully. Obviously, then, you're nothing but a little baby boy. Obviously, said the colonel scornfully. Obviously, said the doctor, the chaplain, the psychiatrist, the whole board of captains and majors and colonels scornfully. Obviously, said the new group of men. And suddenly, once they had said it, Munro looked different to them. He looked like a little boy. The general blinked his eyes and stared very hard. He stared harder than he'd ever stared in his whole life. Then finally he said, I rule that this is a little boy. Everybody nodded in agreement. Who could ever think that was anything but a little boy? They said. Then he made it out to be a big joke. They pinched Munro's cheeks and they tousled his hair and they gave him a release to sign. The day Munro was sent home, they held a big parade in his honor. There were newsreel photographers and live television and his mother and father and all the kids in the neighborhood. And even another message from the president. I hold no fear for our nation's future when even a mere lad of 4 is stirred strongly enough by our cause to enlist himself in the service of his country. And a man from the American Legion came around and asked him to join. He was awarded a medal, a set of military brushes, and a whole box of toy nuclear weapons. Munro was a hero. Oh, his parents were very proud. But from that time on, whenever he became cranky, and he wouldn't eat, no! And he wouldn't sleep, no! And he hated little girls, yeah! His mom would remind him of the army, and Munro would be a good boy. A very good boy indeed. Thanks. Bye.